Okay, so in project integration management now, continuing with the processes, we're going to turn to Develop Project Charter. Develop Project Charter becomes a document. It's one of three that we can't really change. The rest become things that are active, but still active. It's something we'll use over and over, and it's at a very high level. We're going to use these documents in the process groups to monitor, control, etc., the project management plan, which is section B. Okay, so the very next slide is the actual project charter. The project charter does two things for us. It formally authorizes the project, and it gives us access or authority to use resources. Very important. It is at a very high level, and the project charter is really drilling down from this very, very high business case to a very high charter, to a more detailed plan, and then to execution and changes within execution later. The project charter establishes then this partnership between performing and requesting organizations. Project manager at this point is identified formally to develop the charter and to run the project, though if possible you would want to assign the project manager in advance of this. And they could be at the C-suite meetings. They wouldn't be participating largely. They'd be listening. They'd be watching stakeholders. Who has complaints? Who has suggestions? How do they define success? What are their issues? Because knowing that, we give you insight on how to make or leverage those stakeholders for the success of this corporately accepted project. Remember, projects are initiated due to internal business needs or external influences. We talked about that back on page 9 of the PMBOK guide. And we talked about the triggers in a project, creating then a needs analysis or feasibility study, and then the business case. So here we are, starting with the inputs then, our business documents, okay? These are not project management, so the PM doesn't have to update them, but they're business documents, including the business case and the benefits management plan. You'd want to review them periodically. The business case is used to create the project charter as an input, and you want to justify the required investment by using the business case. It is commonly used for decision making in the project. So, for example, if a stakeholder says, hey, I want to put this in as a requirement, I say, well, you know what? It really is outside of the scope of the business case or the charter or some other activity such as that. On page 78 of the PMBOK guide is just a review, again back from page 9, of the business case, which is a result of some of these items, technological advance, legal requirements, etc., etc. Those were all discussed back on page 9 and in the first lesson. The next input are agreements, which go by many terms. Sometimes they're called contracts. Sometimes they're called memorandums of understanding or MOUs. SLAs or service level agreements is another item here. A service level agreement is when two organizations are going to provide each other service. It discusses what's my response time. If I call you, you must respond within 8 hours. You must fix my problem within 12. It's about service between organizations. Also goes by a letter of intent or a letter of agreement, those sort of things. EEFs and OPAs we've discussed. Remember, EEFs are items largely outside the project manager's control that you may have some influence over, such as stakeholder risk assessment. They're largely outside of your control. And OPAs, organizational process assets we discussed, those are internal items, largely internal items. And there were two types we talked about last week, processes, policies and procedures, and corporate knowledge base. Corporate knowledge base, not any knowledge base. Then moving on in the charter, we discussed the tools. Expert judgment is one tool, meaning meetings are a second tool. In expert judgment, I want to emphasize that the PMBOK guide, if it asks about expert judgment on a test, always call it's either an individual or a group. So expert judgment can be from a group, and it's always referred to as specialized knowledge. Okay. The data gathering techniques, remember you're early on in the process, so you don't have a lot to work from. You'll do some brainstorming. You will conduct focus groups by bringing key people together, asking them focused questions, defining success criteria. You can also do that in the interview process. Before I begin any project, I identify the key stakeholders. I go around asking them a series of questions about risk, success criteria, requirements, regulations. And from that, and the last question I always ask every stakeholder is can you name other stakeholders that you think I should talk to? And then there's interpersonal and team skills. Already you're beginning to have people that you're working with. You must have an awareness, and I talk about this more in resource management. You must have an understanding of conflict management, facilitation techniques, and meeting management. So for example, in meeting management, you'd always want to have an agenda. You only invite those that should be at the meeting. No more of these, hey, it's every Wednesday and everybody come sit around the table. And how many people around that table don't speak or don't really have anything to offer that's substantive, and it's just using their time. And then you'd want to follow up on the agenda for action items. Okay, the outputs then to the charter, a develop project charter process is the charter. That's the number one output. Includes at a high level, remember the business case was very, very high level. The charter now is high level as we begin to drill down. It'll have high level requirements, objectives, success criteria, a summary or rough order of magnitude budget, milestones, etc. And then of course you've already started your assumptions log. And whenever the project management body of knowledge says assumptions log, it means assumptions and constraints. Those are contained within the assumptions log. Now here's a picture of a charter that's been developed. Notice it starts with your name on it, the project manager. It'll list the sponsor, and both you and the sponsor will sign the bottom. The project can actually have more than one sponsor, and if that's the case, you would want to list both of them there. Okay. Notice key assumptions and key constraints. Those will all be on your assumptions log. Overall risks, some summary milestones. ROM costs, rough order of magnitude costs. We'll talk about those later in the budgeting process and cost management. But that's really such a high level, and you may have taken that from a previous project of recent history that is very close to your project. You'd borrow their budget. It's rough order of magnitude. It says to your boss, I'm either minus 25% to plus 75% of the target. So it's ROM, rough order of magnitude. And clearly, always define success. What is success defined as in the project? How do you know you're done? Okay. Then I want to go ahead and develop the project management plan, which is its own process for you to work. When I develop the project management plan, now I go from charter, which has objectives. Remember, they're high-level objectives, but those are still measurable. To now in the project plan, those objectives will be detailed. So a measurable objective might be the project has developed the Golden Gate Bridge, and as a high-level measurable objective, it must span this body of water, it must touch the ends, it must be able to support so many tons. It's a high-level measurable. Those are measurable. But those aren't the details. The details are very important. Okay? So in developing the project plan, we will define, prepare, and coordinate all components. So if you look back on page 25, all of those processes under there are going to be coordinated and integrated into a single coherent plan. Like any project plan, it defines how I'm going to do something. In this case, the project management plan defines how I'm going to execute, monitor, control, and close the project. And the plan, of course, must be baseline for at least scope, time, and cost. Must be baseline. Once it's baseline, it may only be changed through the Perform Integrated Change Control process. That's the only way to change a project management plan, through ICC. Okay? And of course, the plan is very good. We build a plan hoping we don't have changes, but of course, as project managers, we also expect changes. So, because what we're doing is unique and temporary. We're just trying to build and perfect it so that we could turn it over to operations somehow at some point, or maintenance, or whatever the common regular function is. The inputs start with the charter. So here's a key concept to project management as you use page 25 and look around. The outputs of a previous process become inputs to the next process. So my last process was develop project charter. My output was the project charter. So what becomes an input to develop project management plan? It's the output of my last process. So in this case, it makes sense that the input becomes the charter. Okay. I also have outputs from other processes as inputs here. What do I mean by that? When you look on page 25, you see all those processes. They're all being done simultaneously and largely independently. The cost team is doing the cost management plan. The business analysts are doing the scope management plan. Well, they may deliver my scope management plan and say, here you go, boss, this is perfect. And I'll say, whoa, because that does not match my budget at all. Let's now continue to define the scope to match the budget, to match the schedule, to match the quality, etc. So as those individual processes have outputs, we want to make sure they're balanced and integrated and coordinated amongst everything. Okay? And that's what I mean by outputs from other processes. And of course, EEFs and OPAs. Now my tools become expert judgment. Remember I said those are individuals or groups with specialized knowledge. From a data gathering perspective, again, brainstorming, checklist, focus groups, and interviews, clearly defined in the PMBOK Guide, page 85. My outputs then is like the Ohio State University. There's only one. There is the project management plan. There is only one. It now becomes my set of methodologies, my scope methodology, my cost methodology, my risk methodology. These also become constraints. It has my baselines and etc. Okay, that is it. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I'll see you next session.